heart pounded in her chest as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from the tears she had shed, but now anger took over. She clenched her fists, breathing heavily. How could her mother doubt her? After everything she had been through, she had hoped that the truth would set her free, that Mama Jane would hold her, cry with her and fight for her. But instead she had stood frozen, her face twisted in disbelief. Jane had seen the hesitation in her mother's eyes, the fear, the doubt. "I should have known," Jane muttered under her breath. "I should have known she would protect him." She walked to her bed and sat down. Her mind raced. If her own mother wasn't going to stand up for her, then she would have to do it herself. But how? Who would believe her? The whole church worshipped Pastor Abel like he was a saint. She had seen how the congregation looked at him, how they clapped and cheered at his words. Her stomach churned. She placed a hand over it, remembering the tiny life growing inside her. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't let that man walk free while she suffered in silence. Meanwhile, Mama Jane sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the floor. Her mind was in turmoil. How had she failed her daughter like this? How had she been so blind? She had always believed in Pastor Abel. He was a man of God, a man who had prayed for her during her toughest times. He had given her hope when she had none. And now, her own daughter was accusing him of something so terrible. Her hands trembled as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. What was she supposed to do now? If she spoke up, people would turn against them. The church members would call Jane a liar. The shame, the embarrassment, it would ruin them. But was that more important than her daughter? Tears welled up in her eyes as she covered her face with her hands. "God help me," she whispered. A knock on the door startled her. She quickly wiped her face and stood up, composing herself before opening the door. Jane stood there, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to talk," Jane said firmly. Mama Jane swallowed. "Jane, No, Mama," Jane cut her off. "You're either with me or against me. I won't stay quiet. I won't let him get away with this." Mama Jane's heart ached at the pain in her daughter's voice. She knew she had to make a choice, and this time she had to choose right. The next morning, Jane woke up early, her mind set on one thing: finding Deborah. She remembered the day she had seen the girl rush out of Pastor Abel's office in tears. The look on her face had haunted Jane ever since. She needed to know if her suspicions were right. She quickly got dressed and left the house without saying much to her mother. She wasn't in the mood for another argument. She was done waiting for Mama Jane to act. It was time to take matters into her own hands. The morning prayer service had already started when she arrived at the church. The choir was singing softly, and the pastor, leading the prayer session, stood at the pulpit, his voice filling the air. Jane quietly slipped in, scanning the congregation. Her eyes darted from one face to another until they landed on Deborah. She was sitting quietly beside her mother, staring down at her lap. Jane's heart pounded. She took a deep breath and moved towards an empty seat behind Deborah. As she settled down, she quickly tore a small piece of paper from her notebook, scribbled a note, and carefully passed it to Deborah when no one was looking. "Let's meet in the toilet in 10 minutes." She waited anxiously as Deborah took the note. The girl hesitated before slowly turning to look at Jane. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Deborah seemed unsure. But then she gave a slight nod. Jane exhaled in relief. Now all she had to do was wait. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Jane kept glancing at the clock on the wall, her hands sweating. When the time finally came, she quietly got up and walked towards the restroom. She kept her head down, not wanting to attract any attention. When she stepped inside, she found Deborah already there, standing near the sink, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Deborah's eyes flickered with suspicion. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cautious. Jane took a deep breath. "I saw you that day, rushing out of Pastor Abel's office, crying. I need to know what happened." Deborah's face tensed. She looked away, shaking her head. "It's nothing," she mumbled. "Forget about it." Jane stepped closer. Please, Deborah, I need to know. You don't have to be afraid. Whatever happened, you're not alone. Deborah swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the edge of the sink. I don't know what you're talking about. Jane sighed, realizing Deborah was scared, just like she had been. She needed to gain her trust. I know how you feel, Jane said softly, because the same thing happened to me. Deborah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Jane's throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. Pastor Abel, he took advantage of me too. Deverell's eyes filled with unshed tears. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, her chest rising and falling rapidly. You don't have to say anything right now, but please, just know that I believe you. And you're not alone. Deborah let out a shaky breath, her body trembling. It was the first time someone had told her those words, the first time she didn't feel so alone. Deborah stood frozen. She looked down, her lips trembling as she struggled to find the words. Jane could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear, the pain, and the weight of secrets she had carried for too long. After what felt like forever, Deborah let out a shaky breath and whispered, "It's been happening for 2 years." Jane's heart clenched. 2 years? She repeated in disbelief. Deborah nodded slowly, blinking back tears. I've tried to run away, Jane. I swear I have. Her voice cracked, and she let out a bitter laugh. But my mother, she caught me and brought me back. And do you know the worst part? Jane swallowed hard. What? Deborah's eyes darkened with pain. She knows. She has always known. Jane's breath hitched. She took a step back, struggling to process what she had just heard. Your mother knows? And she hasn't done anything? Deborah let out a hollow laugh. Not just that. I've been pregnant 3 times. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold her broken pieces together. And each time my mother took care of it. She says we can't do anything against the pastor. Jane felt sick to her stomach. The walls of the small restroom seemed to close in on her, making it hard to breathe. This can't be happening, she muttered. Deborah wiped her tears and looked directly into Jane's eyes. So tell me, Jane, what do we do? How do we escape when even our own mothers won't protect us? Jane clenched her fists. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stronger than fear. Anger. Pastor Abel had destroyed too many lives, and their own families had failed them. If no one would help them, they had to help themselves. We'll figure something out, Jane said firmly. Deborah let out a dry laugh. How? Where will we even start? Jane inhaled deeply. First, let's exchange numbers. We need to stay in touch. No matter what happens, we need to stand together. Deborah hesitated for a moment before nodding. They quickly exchanged numbers, the weight of their shared pain bringing them closer. Jane squeezed her hand gently. We'll find a way to be free, I promise. Deborah's eyes shone with a glimmer of hope, the first Jane had seen in her. I want to believe you, she whispered. Jane forced a small smile. Then believe me, we will not be silent anymore. The church service was still ongoing when they quietly slipped back into the congregation. Jane sat in her usual spot, but her mind was far away. For the first time since her nightmare began, she had an ally, someone who understood, someone who had suffered just as much. And now she had a purpose. She didn't know how yet, but one thing was clear. She was going to fight. At home, Mama Jane moved around cautiously, avoiding Jane as much as possible. She wanted to speak to her daughter, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She hadn't even figured out what to do yet. Every time she thought about what Jane had said, her chest tightened. How could she have been so blind? She had trusted Pastor Abel with everything, even above her own daughter. And now, if she spoke up, how would people react? Would they believe Jane? Or would they think she was trying to tarnish the pastor's name? What if this became a huge embarrassment for the family? Mama Jane sighed and shook her head. She wasn't ready to face this yet. Maybe she just needed more time to think. Meanwhile, in her room, Jane sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She had typed in the search bar, "How to expose a fake pastor." Several articles popped up, but most of them talked about being careful, not spreading rumors, and praying for guidance. Jane frowned. She wasn't here to be careful. She needed justice. She continued scrolling until she found an article that caught her attention, "How to reveal a bad pastor and seek justice." Her eyes scanned through the content quickly. It mentioned 3 key things. 1. Getting a trusted adult on your side. 2. Gathering evidence. 3. Recording a confession. Jane's heart started beating faster. This was it. If she wanted to bring Pastor Rebel down, she couldn't do it alone. She needed an adult who would listen and believe them. Her mind immediately went to Sister Lola, the Sunday school teacher. Sister Lola was different from the other women in church. She was kind, she listened, and she always defended young girls when people blamed them for dressing inappropriately or being too friendly with men. If anyone would believe her and Deborah, it was Sister Lola. Jane exhaled deeply. She had to wait until Sunday to see her. That was 3 whole days away. It felt like forever, but she had no choice. On Sunday morning, Jane dressed up quickly, ignoring her mother's watchful eyes as she tied her scarf. Mama Jane had been quieter than usual, and Jane didn't have time to wonder why. She had more important things to focus on. As she walked to church, she texted Deborah. "I have a plan. We need to talk to Sister Lola." Deborah responded almost immediately. "You think she will help?" "I know she will." Deborah sent a thumbs-up emoji, and Jane felt a bit of relief. During Sunday school, Jane sat quietly as Sister Lola taught the lesson. The topic was about honesty and doing the right thing, and it almost felt like she was speaking directly to Jane. After a while, Jane took a deep breath, wrote a short note on a piece of paper, and stood up. She walked to the front, where Sister Lola stood, pretending to be asking a question. Instead, she slipped the note into Sister Lola's hand. Sister Lola glanced down at it, and then looked at Jane. Jane held her breath as the woman's eyes met hers. Then, Sister Lola gave a small nod and continued with her teaching. After church, Sister Lola approached Jane as she stood under a tree, anxiously waiting. The Sunday service was over, and most members were either heading home or standing in small groups discussing the sermon. Jane spotted Deborah walking toward them, and she swallowed hard. This was it. Sister Lola led them to a quiet spot outside the church premises, away from prying ears. She could already sense that whatever Jane had to say was serious, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to hear. Taking a deep breath, Jane started talking. She told Sister Lola everything. How Pastor Abel had been abusing her, how he had also done the same to Deborah, and, worst of all, how she was pregnant with his child. Sister Lola's eyes widened in horror. She covered her mouth with her hands, trying to process what she had just heard. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. Jane's hands clenched into fists. "Would I lie about something like this?" she said, her voice cracking. Deborah, who had remained silent all along, finally spoke up. "She's not lying. He has been doing it to me for 2 years. My mother knows but does nothing." Her voice shook and tears welled up in her eyes. Sister Lola stared at them, searching their faces. The pain, the anger, the fear. It was all real. She took a deep breath. "I believe you." Jane's heart leapt with relief. Finally, someone believed them. Sister Lola straightened. "We need evidence. That's the only way to bring him down. If we report without proof, people might not believe us and he could get away with it." Jane wiped her tears and nodded. "How do we get proof?" Sister Lola thought for a moment, then looked at Jane. "Do you think he will call for you again?" Jane's stomach churned at the thought, but she nodded. "He always does." "Good," Sister Lola said. "We will use that against him." She reached into her bag and pulled out what looked like a regular pair of eyeglasses. "This is a special camera. It records everything it sees. When he calls for you, wear this and let it capture everything." Jane hesitated. She hated the idea of being near that man again, but this was the only way to stop him. 3 days later, Jane's phone rang. It was Pastor Abel. "Come to my office after evening service," he said. Jane's stomach twisted with disgust, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Okay, sir." That evening, she put on the special eyeglasses and made her way to his office. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stepped inside. As expected, Pastor Abel locked the door and walked toward her with that sickening smile. "You should be used to this by now," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I've been teaching you how to be a woman, and you still act like you don't enjoy it." Jane's skin crawled, but she stayed still. She needed him to say more. He continued talking, boasting about how he had trained many girls like her. "I know how to pick them," he said. "Girls with no fathers at home or mothers who are easy to convince. Your mother, for example. She believed everything I said." He laughed. Jane clenched her fists, fighting back the urge to slap him. After a few minutes, she made an excuse and left. The moment she stepped out of the office, she ran straight to Sister Lola, who was waiting outside with Deborah. The recording was perfect. The next morning, they went to the police station. With Sister Lola's help, they submitted the evidence and filed a formal complaint. The officers listened to the recording, their faces hardening with anger. That evening, Pastor Abel was arrested in his home. When questioned, he admitted to everything. He even revealed that he specifically targeted girls from single-parent homes or homes where the father was not very present. "The mothers are easy to manipulate," he said with a twisted smile. The judge wasted no time sentencing him to prison. For the first time in a long time, Jane felt like she could breathe again. But the battle had taken a toll on her. A few days after his arrest, she collapsed in her room. Her mother rushed her to the hospital, where they received the news. She had suffered a miscarriage. Mama Jane broke down in tears. The guilt overwhelmed her. She had failed her daughter, and now she was paying the price. Deborah, on the other hand, finally felt free. No more secret abortions, no more abuse. She had her life back. Their mothers learned the hard way that protecting their daughters should always come before blind faith in any man, pastor or not. And as for Jane, she may have lost something, but she had won a bigger battle. She had taken down a monster, and she was never going to let anyone silence her again. He pulled Jane closer to himself. "Jane, this is a privilege for you. I am a man of God, and anything I do to you must be appreciated." Jane tried to pull back, but he grabbed her closer to himself. "You must obey me." Jane is a 16-year-old girl who had just finished her secondary education. She sat on the couch in their living room, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly. She could hear her mother, Mama Jane, talking to someone outside. The moment she heard her name, she knew trouble was coming. "Jane, come here," her mother's sharp voice called. Jane sighed and dropped her phone on the table before dragging herself outside. Mama Jane was standing at the gate talking to their neighbour, Mama Chinedu. "Yes, Mummy," Jane responded. Mama Jane eyed her from head to toe, then shook her head. "You have been inside pressing phone since morning. Don't you know you should be praying for your admission?" Jane bit her tongue to stop herself from rolling her eyes. Ever since she finished her senior year exams, her mother had been acting as if she was the one who created university admission. Every morning it was one prayer session or the other. She didn't have a problem praying, but Mama Jane took it to another level. "I pray, Mummy," Jane replied carefully. Mama Jane hissed. "Not enough. See, you have to go and see Pastor Abel today. I have already spoken to him, and he is waiting for you." Jane felt her stomach drop. "Mummy, I don't think that's necessary. I pray to God myself, and I know he will answer me." Mama Jane clapped her hands together dramatically. "Ian, you know more than me now. You are now my mother, Abi. Since when did you start arguing with me about prayers?" Pastor Abel is God's servant. If he prays for you, your admission will come quickly. Mummy, that's not how it works, Jane tried to reason with her. God answers prayers in his time, and I don't feel comfortable. Before she could finish, Mama Jane had already started nagging. You are too stubborn. I said you must go, and that is final. If you refuse, I will know you are planning to disgrace me. Jane's lips tightened. She knew there was no point in arguing further. Once Mama Jane made up her mind, it was like trying to move a mountain with bare hands. An hour later, Jane found herself sitting on a plastic chair inside the small office at the back of the church. Pastor Abel, popularly known as Daddy See All, was sitting behind a wooden table, nodding as Mama Jane explained why they had come. She is waiting for admission, Daddy See All, Mama Jane said, leaning forward eagerly. You know how difficult it is to enter university these days. That's why I brought her. She needs prayers. Pastor Abel smiled. Sister Jane, do you believe that when I pray for you, your admission will come faster? Jane swallowed. I believe God answers prayers, sir. Pastor Abel chuckled and leaned back in his chair. Good. Let us pray. Jane closed her eyes as the pastor began to pray. She could feel Mama Jane shifting excitedly beside her. The pastor's deep voice filled the room, calling on fire, breaking chains, and commanding university doors to open. After what felt like forever, he finally ended the prayer. But then, he looked straight at Jane with a serious expression. The Lord is showing me something, he said dramatically. Jane, you need private prayers. There is a strong force blocking your admission. You must come back for deliverance sessions. Jane's eyes flew to her mother, hoping she would reject the idea, but Mama Jane was already nodding eagerly. Yes, Pastor, she will come. Jane felt her heart sink. That night, Jane lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The fan made a low humming noise as it rotated above her, but she was too restless to sleep. She didn't like this whole private prayer idea. Something about it didn't feel right. She had never been comfortable with how people worshipped Daddy See All, like he was God himself. Her best friend, Cynthia, had once told her stories about fake pastors who took advantage of people's desperation. Jane had dismissed it at the time, but now she couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling in her chest. Her door creaked open, and her mother poked her head in. Jane, don't forget you are going back to the church tomorrow. Jane sighed. Mummy, I don't want to go. Mama Jane's face changed immediately. Are you mad? After everything Daddy See All did for you today, you better wake up early. I don't want to hear any nonsense from you. With that, she banged the door shut. Jane groaned and buried her face in her pillow. She didn't know why, but something told her that going back to that church would be the beginning of something terrible. The next morning, Jane dragged her feet as she walked into the church compound. The main church hall was empty, but she could hear voices from the small office at the back. She had tried to convince her mother again, but the woman refused to listen. Now she was standing outside Pastor Abel's office, her stomach twisting in knots. The door opened suddenly, and a young woman rushed out, adjusting her wrapper. She looked shaken, her eyes darting around as if she had seen a ghost. Jane frowned. What was wrong with her? Before she could process it, the pastor's voice boomed from inside. Come in, Jane. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The office smelled of anointing oil and something else she couldn't place. Pastor Abel was sitting behind his desk, smiling. Welcome, my dear, he said. Today we are going to break the chains holding you back. Jane nodded slowly. Let us begin. Jane sat stiffly in the chair as Pastor Abel Daddy See All rose from his seat. The air in the small office felt thick, and she could hear the sound of the ceiling fan rotating lazily above them. Her fingers gripped the edge of her dress as she tried to calm the uneasy feeling in her stomach. Pastor Abel smiled at her, his large hand resting on the desk. Jane, do you believe that when a man of God prays for you, things happen faster? Jane nodded hesitantly. Yes, sir. He chuckled and leaned closer, his belly pressing against the table. Good. But there are some kinds of prayers that need special attention. Some prayers don't work unless certain instructions are followed. Jane frowned. What kind of instructions? Pastor Abel's hand reached out and rested on her shoulder. She stiffened. His palm was heavy, warm, and uncomfortably firm. Slowly, his hand moved down her arm. Jane swallowed hard and shifted in her seat, trying to move away from his touch, but he ignored her discomfort and leaned in even closer. "My daughter, you must learn to trust the man of God," he said, his voice low and thick. "The Spirit is leading me to do something special for you. If you obey, your admission will come faster." Jane's confusion deepened. "Pastor, I don't understand." Before she could finish, he shushed her. Then, without warning, he planted a kiss on her cheek. Jane's entire body went cold. She jerked back immediately, her breath catching in her throat. "Daddy see all, what are you doing?" she asked in shock, her voice trembling. But the smile never left his face. Instead, his expression darkened, and his grip on her arm tightened. "Sit down, Jane," he said, his voice suddenly commanding. Jane sprang to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. I need to go," she stammered, moving toward the door. Before she could reach it, his large hand grabbed her wrist and yanked her back. "Where do you think you are going?" he hissed. Jane struggled, fear spreading through her veins like wildfire. "Let me go. I will tell my mother." Pastor Ebel let out a deep, chilling laugh. "Your mother? Do you think she will believe you? Who do you think she trusts more, me or you?"
Jane's breathing became ragged. She knew he was right. Mama Jane idolized Pastor Abel. She would never believe her. Before she could scream, before she could fight harder, he shoved her against the desk and covered her mouth with his hand. Jane kicked and struggled, but he was too strong.
Tears burned her eyes as she realized what was about to happen. And no one would believe her. Jane pulled herself together as she stumbled out of the pastor's office. Her legs felt weak and her vision was blurred with tears. The hot afternoon sun burned against her skin as she walked blindly out of the church compound. Her heart pounded in her chest, her body aching, but the pain in her soul was worse. She had never felt so helpless in her life. As she approached her house, she wiped her face with the edge of her dress, but the tears wouldn't stop. She sniffled and dragged her feet towards the front door. Mama Jane was sitting on the wooden bench outside, peeling cassava. She looked up as Jane walked past her, frowning when she noticed her red, swollen eyes. "What is wrong with you?" she asked sharply. Jane hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing, Mummy." Mama Jane clicked her tongue. "Nothing? Then why are you crying? Did something happen at the church?" Jane swallowed hard, her heart racing. This was it. This was her chance to tell her mother everything. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "Mummy, I don't want to go back to the pastor again." Mama Jane raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jane's lips trembled. "I don't want to see him again, please." Her mother dropped the knife she was using and turned fully to face her. "Are you mad? Why are you talking like a foolish girl? You think you know more than me." Jane felt a lump form in her throat. "Mummy, please listen to me. I don't feel safe with him. He did something to me." Mama Jane's face twisted in irritation. "What nonsense are you saying?" Jane felt her tears return as she struggled to explain. "He touched me, Mummy. He forced himself on me." Mama Jane's eyes widened slightly, then just as quickly, she scoffed. "You're lying." Jane's heart dropped. "Mummy, I'm not lying, I swear." But Mama Jane waved her hand dismissively. "Enough. Do you know who you are talking about? Daddy Seal is a man of God. Do you think he will ruin his anointing because of you?" Jane stared at her in shock. "Mummy, he hurt me." Mama Jane hissed loudly. "Shut up. I don't want to hear another word. Whatever happened there was a spiritual deliverance. Maybe the Holy Spirit touched you and that is why you are confused. Instead of being grateful, you are here talking rubbish." Jane Jane felt like her entire world had collapsed. She had feared her mother wouldn't believe her, but hearing it with her own ears still crushed her soul. Mama Jane turned back to her cassava, her face hard and unbothered. "I don't want to hear anything again. In fact, you are still going back to see him." Jane gasped softly, her hands shaking. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She had lost. Without another word, she turned and walked into the house. She went straight to her room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. The sobs came in waves, her chest tightening with each one. Her mother didn't believe her. She had no one to turn to. And worst of all, this wasn't going to stop. The next day, Pastor Abel called. Mama Jane came into Jane's room with a bright smile. "Get dressed, Daddy Seol is waiting for you," she announced. Jane lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her body numb. She didn't answer. Mama Jane slapped her leg. "Stand up and get ready. Don't let the devil use you." Jane blinked back her tears, knowing she had no choice. She was going back to hell, and this was now her life. The church was packed as usual, with voices raised in songs of praise. The choir sang with energy, and the congregation clapped and danced, some waving white handkerchiefs in the air. Jane sat stiffly beside her mother, staring at the pulpit where Pastor Abel, Daddy See-All, stood, microphone in hand, preaching about prosperity and riches. His voice boomed through the speakers, his words filled with promises of divine financial breakthrough. "When you sow into the house of God, when you obey the instructions of the man of God, riches will locate you," he declared. "Amen," the congregation chorused. "Some of you are sitting on your miracles. God is watching your obedience. Do you want to remain poor forever?" "No, Pastor," someone shouted. "Then ride on, Pastor," another man yelled, and soon others joined, cheering him on. "Ride on, Daddy See-All." Jane's stomach churned as she looked around. These were the same people who trusted him blindly, the same people who would never believe her if she spoke the truth. She clenched her fists, feeling like standing up and screaming, "He is a monster! He is not a man of God." But she remained silent. After the service, Mama Jane turned to her, adjusting her scarf. "We have to go and see Daddy See-All. We need to thank him for his dedication to your case." Jane swallowed hard. "Mummy, please." Her mother shot her a sharp look. "Jane, don't start. Do you know how many people wish a powerful man of God like him would take special interest in them? You should be on your knees, thanking God every day." Jane looked away, knowing there was no use arguing. She followed her mother to the pastor's office, her legs heavy like lead. The door was slightly open when they arrived, and just as they were about to knock, a girl stormed out of the office angrily. Jane recognized her immediately. Deborah. She was one of the church's most active youths, always seen at choir practice or helping the ushers during service, but now her face was filled with fury, her hands shaking as she adjusted her dress. Her eyes met Jane's briefly before she looked away and marched toward the exit. Jane's heart pounded. Does she know? Did he do something to her too? For a moment, Jane wanted to run after Deborah, to ask if she was okay, to find out if she was going through the same nightmare. But before she could move, Mama Jane knocked on the door and pushed it open. Jane swallowed the lump in her throat and walked inside. Pastor Abel was sitting behind his large desk, his usual broad smile stretching across his face. "Ah, my daughter, welcome." Mama Jane beamed. "Daddy, I brought her again, just as you instructed." Daddy See-All nodded approvingly. "Good, good. You are a mother of faith." Mama Jane turned to Jane. "I will be outside. Obey the man of God, and may your miracle locate you soon." She patted Jane's shoulder before stepping out and closing the door. Jane's legs shook as she stood there, staring at the man who had stolen her innocence. Pastor Abel rose from his seat and walked toward her. "Jane, you know why you are here." She lowered her head, her vision blurred with unshed tears. "Come," he said, gesturing to her. Jane didn't move. He sighed, stepping closer until he was directly in front of her. You are acting stubborn today. Do you not want your blessings? Jane's lips trembled. Please, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Pastor Abel tilted his head. Please? What? Jane dropped to her knees, her body shaking violently. Please stop. You're hurting me. I just want to be a normal teenager. Daddy Seol let out a deep chuckle, crouching down beside her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, making her flinch. My dear, you are special. I am releasing blessings upon your life. Jane sobbed, shaking her head. I don't want these blessings. I just want to be left alone. His grip on her tightened, and his voice dropped into a whisper. I like it young and fresh, Jane. You were chosen for a reason. Do not reject the anointing. Jane squeezed her eyes shut as his hands moved again. And just like before, her nightmare continued, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Jane walked home in silence, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if that could protect her from the storm brewing inside her. She was tired. Physically, emotionally, mentally. The weight of her secret was suffocating her, and with each passing day, she felt like she was drowning in an ocean of pain with no one to save her. As she approached the house, she paused at the doorway, staring at her mother, who was busy cutting vegetables. Jane's lips trembled. Should I try again? Will she believe me now? Her mother's carefree laughter rang in her ears. No, she wouldn't. Jane let out a shaky breath and turned away, walking straight to her room. She locked the door, curled up on her bed, and let the tears flow freely. She cried until sleep took her. For the next 2 weeks, life seemed normal. Pastor Abel was away on an outreach mission, and Jane finally felt a small sense of peace. She focused on her chores, avoiding her mother as much as possible, pretending that everything was fine. But inside, she was still broken. One afternoon, while sweeping the compound, a sudden dizziness washed over her. Her vision blurred, and her legs wobbled. She tried to hold onto the wall, but before she could steady herself, darkness consumed her, and she collapsed to the ground. The next thing she knew, she was lying on the floor, her mother and their neighbor, Mama Ada, hovering over her. Jane! Jane, wake up! Her mother's panicked voice called out. Mama Ada fanned her face, while her mother sprinkled cold water on her. After a few moments, Jane's eyes fluttered open. She's awake. Mama Ada sighed in relief. Jane groaned, holding her head as the dizziness slowly faded. What happened? She muttered weakly. You just collapsed. When was the last time you ate? Her mother scolded. Mama Ada studied Jane carefully. Something isn't right, she murmured. What do you mean? Mama Jane asked, her brows furrowing. Mama Ada pulled her aside, lowering her voice. Haven't you noticed? Her body is changing. The tiredness, the dizziness. Can't you see? She looks pregnant. Mama Jane's eyes widened in shock. Pregnant? God forbid. Mama Ada sighed. I think you should check, just to be sure. Mama Jane shook her head, refusing to believe it. But as she turned to look at Jane, doubts started creeping into her mind. That evening, she bought a pregnancy test and forced Jane to take it. Jane sat in the bathroom, staring at the test in her trembling hands, fear clawing at her throat. A few minutes later, her worst nightmare came true. The test was positive. Jane walked out of the bathroom, her face pale, her hands shaking as she handed the test to her mother. Mama Jane snatched it from her, her eyes scanning the result. She gasped loudly, her hands flying to her head. Jesus Christ, Jane! Who did this to you? Tears welled in Jane's eyes. Her mother's face twisted in rage. I said, who got you pregnant? She screamed. Jane's whole body shook as she whispered, Pastor Abel. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Mama Jane staggered back, her expression twisting from shock to anger. You're lying, she spat. Jane shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm not lying, Mummy. I've been trying to tell you. He's been... Her voice cracked, her sobs choking her. "He's been doing this to me for months, and you refuse to listen." Mama Jane's chest rose and fell rapidly. "Shut up! Don't you dare speak such nonsense about a man of God. Pastor Abel is a servant of the Most High. He would never do such a thing." Jane let out a bitter laugh between her tears. "Of course you don't believe me. You never do. You trust that man more than your own daughter." "Because you're lying," Mama Jane screamed, her hands shaking violently. "You must have been sleeping around, and now you want to blame an innocent man." Jane's heart shattered. She had feared this reaction, but deep down she had still hoped. Hoped that just this once, her mother would be on her side. Her hands balled into fists. "You are not fit to be a mother," she hissed through clenched teeth. Mama Jane froze. Jane's tears burned as she continued. "I have been trying to tell you. I have been crying for help. But no, you are too blind, too loyal to your so-called man of God. You let him destroy me, and now you're calling me a liar?" She shook her head, her entire body trembling. "You failed me, Mummy. You failed me." Mama Jane's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. She stood frozen, torn between believing her daughter or trusting the pastor she had. "Shola, I know a secret about Omiladun. She's a mermaid." Anita dropped the bombshell on Shola that afternoon under the mango tree. Shola sat quietly on the school bus, her head leaning against the window as the vehicle rumbled along the bumpy road to Victory Secondary School. Her group of friends, however, were far from silent. They filled the bus with laughter, teasing, and the occasional mockery aimed at a few students sitting timidly at the back. Shola was used to this. In fact, she often joined in. She and her friends had a reputation for finding delight in picking on others, especially those who dared to be different or stood out for being good. Today, though, her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts wandered to the love note she had carefully written the night before. It was tucked safely in the pocket of her school bag. Shola had never been the type to express her feelings openly, but there was something about Daniel that made her want to take the risk. Daniel was not just any boy. He was the most popular student in their class, handsome, confident, and kind in a way that made him stand out from the rest. Shola's heart fluttered just thinking about him. The bus hit a pothole, jolting her out of her thoughts. She turned her attention to the lively chatter happening behind her. Omiladun, one of the most beautiful girls in their class, was talking animatedly with her best friend Anita. Shola hadn't noticed them at first, but Omiladun's melodic voice caught her attention. She strained to hear what they were saying. "I still can't believe it," Omiladun said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Daniel actually asked me to the school dance. Can you imagine?" Anita gasped. "You're so lucky, Omiladun. Everyone knows he's the dream boy of the whole school. You have to tell me everything he said." Shola forced a weak smile and shook her head. "It's nothing," she mumbled. Shola froze. The words hit her like a bucket of cold water. Daniel had asked Omiladun to the dance. Her heart sank as she gripped the edge of her seat. She hadn't even had the chance to give him her note, and now it felt pointless. Her friends, seated beside her, noticed her sudden change in mood. Funmi, the loudest of the group, nudged her. "Shola, what's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost." She followed Shola's gaze to the back of the bus, where Omiladun was still gushing about Daniel. "Oh," Funmi said, smirking. "I see what's going on. You're upset because Miss Perfect back there has Daniel wrapped around her finger, aren't you?" "Stop it, Funmi," Sholan snapped, though her voice lacked its usual edge. Funmi grinned mischievously. "Don't worry, Shola. We'll sort her out. She's always acting like she's better than everyone else. Maybe it's time you reminded her who runs things around here." The other girls in the group chuckled in agreement, already plotting ways to make Omiladun's life miserable. Shola, however, stayed silent. Normally, she would have been at the center of such schemes, but today she wasn't so sure. She felt a mixture of anger, jealousy, and disappointment, and it was hard to tell which emotion was winning. As the bus pulled into the school compound, Shola clenched her fists. She couldn't believe Omiladun's luck. How did she get Daniel's attention so easily? Shola glanced at the note in her bag, feeling foolish for even thinking she had a chance. The bus doors creaked open and the students filed out, chatting and laughing. Shola followed her friends, but her mind was still spinning. Omiladun's words echoed in her head. Daniel actually asked me to the school dance. She didn't know how, but Shola was determined to make sure that Omiladun didn't get everything so easily. One way or another, she would find a way to deal with her. As the lunch bell rang, the bustling chatter of Victory Secondary School's cafeteria filled the air. Shola sat at her usual table with her group of friends, picking at her plate of jollof rice, while her eyes scanned the room for one person, Omiladun. She spotted her sitting at a corner table with Anita, laughing as they shared a plate of fried plantains. The sight only fueled the fire in Shola's chest. She couldn't let this go. With a sharp inhale, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the tiled floor. "I'll be right back," she muttered to her friends, who exchanged curious glances. Shola walked across the cafeteria, her steps confident but her heart racing. She reached Omiladun's table and crossed her arms, glaring down at her. Anita noticed first and nudged her friend. "Shola," Omiladun said, looking up, surprised but unfazed. "What do you want?" Shola leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but keeping it firm. "I heard about Daniel asking you to the dance." Omiladun raised an eyebrow. And I think you should turn him down," Shola replied, her tone sharp. Anita let out a small laugh, but Omiladun remained calm. "Why would I do that? He asked me because he wanted to, not because I forced him. What's your problem?" Shola clenched her fists. "My problem is, you think you can just take everything you want without considering anyone else. It's selfish." Omiladun stood up, her full height almost matching Shola's. "Selfish? That's funny coming from you, Shola. You and your friends have spent years making everyone else miserable. Now you want to talk about selfishness." Anita joined in, folding her arms. "And let's be real, Daniel asked Omiladun because he likes her. It's not her fault. Maybe you should stop trying to control what's not yours." The words hit Shola like a slap, and when Omiladun and Anita burst into laughter, she felt her face burn with embarrassment. Unable to think of a comeback, she turned on her heel and walked away, her jaw tight and her pride wounded. Back at her table, her friends noticed her mood immediately. Funmi leaned closer, her voice low. "What happened?" "They laughed at me," Shola said through gritted teeth. "But it's not over. I'm not letting her win." Funmi smirked. "Good. What's the plan?" Shola sat in silence for a moment, her mind racing. Then an idea struck her. "If Daniel likes pretty girls, I'll make sure he notices me. We'll start tomorrow." After school, the group headed to a small cosmetics shop near the market. Shola had never worn makeup before, but today she was determined. They bought lip gloss, eyeliner, and a few other items that Funmi promised would make her stand out. The next morning, Shola arrived at school with perfectly lined eyes and shiny lips. Heads turned as she walked through the gate, her confidence growing with each step. She even managed to catch a few approving whispers from other students. But Daniel barely seemed to notice. He greeted her politely when they crossed paths, but quickly moved on, his attention elsewhere. Shola felt a pang of frustration. She had gone out of her way to look her best, but Daniel was completely unmoved. As the day went on, her friends tried to reassure her. "Maybe he's just playing hard to get," Funmi suggested. "Give it time." Shola nodded, but deep down she wasn't so sure. This was going to be harder than she thought. The school buzzed with excitement as the dance drew closer, and Victory Secondary School seemed livelier than ever. Yet for Shola, every passing day felt like a blow to her pride. Despite her efforts, her makeup, her attempts to look more appealing, Daniel hadn't shown her the slightest interest. In Instead, she frequently spotted him with Omiladun. They walked together between classes, sat under the big mango tree during lunch, and laughed like they didn't have a care in the world. Each time Shola saw them, her jealousy burned hotter. She hated how effortless it all seemed for Omiladun. The life she wanted, Daniel's attention, his laughter, his time, was everything Omiladun had, and it made her blood boil. But Shola wasn't the type to give up easily. If she couldn't take Daniel directly, then she would take a different route. Her gaze shifted to Anita, Omiladun's best friend. Anita was always by Omiladun's side, loyal and supportive. Shola realized that winning Anita over might be the key to turning the tide in her favor. With a cunning smile, she began to put her plan into action. It started small. Shola approached Anita during a break one day and casually struck up a conversation. "Hi, Anita," she said sweetly. "I noticed your braids are so neat. Did you get them done recently?" Anita blinked, surprised by the sudden compliment, but she smiled. "Oh, thank you. My cousin did them over the weekend." "They're really nice," Shola said. "I'd love to get mine done like that someday." From that day, Shola began making more of an effort to talk to Anita. She shared snacks with her during lunch, complimented her outfits, and even began slipping small gifts, perfumes, fancy pens, into Anita's bag. At first, Anita was hesitant, but soon she warmed up to the attention. Omiladun noticed the growing friendship and confronted Anita about it one afternoon. "Why is Shola suddenly all over you?" Omiladun asked, frowning. "She's just being nice," Anita replied, shrugging. "It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Omiladun said firmly. "Shola is up to something. Don't let her fool you." But Anita was enjoying the compliments and gifts too much to listen. She waved Omiladun off, telling her she was overreacting. This only deepened the rift that Shola was carefully creating. One day, Shola decided to escalate her plan. She cornered Anita after school, a sly smile on her face. "Anita, I've been thinking," Shola began, her tone soft and conspiratorial. "You're such a nice person, but don't you feel like you're always in Omiladun's shadow?" Anita frowned, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Well," Shola continued, feigning concern, "everyone always talks about Omiladun. It's like you're just there. Don't you think it's time people notice you for who you are, not as Omiladun's sidekick?" Anita bit her lip, unsure. Shola leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell you what, if you help me out with a little secret about Omiladun, I'll buy you the most gorgeous designer dress for the party. You'll shine so bright, no one will even remember Omiladun." Anita hesitated, torn between her loyalty to her best friend and the tempting offer. The idea of standing out for once was undeniably appealing. Shola smiled inwardly, knowing she had planted the seed of doubt. The game was just beginning. Anita sat on her bed that evening, staring at her phone with a mix of frustration and guilt. Shola's words kept replaying in her mind. "Don't you think it's time people notice you for who you are, not as Omiladun's sidekick?" She felt torn. On one hand, Omiladun was her best friend, the one person she trusted with everything. But on the other hand, she couldn't deny how tempting Shola's offer was. A designer dress would make her stand out at the dance, and for once, she'd feel like more than just Omiladun's friend. By the next morning, Anita had made up her mind. She would approach Omiladun first. Maybe if Omiladun could get her the dress, she wouldn't need to sell her out to Shola. That way, she could avoid betraying her friend and still get what she wanted. During lunch, Anita found Omiladun sitting under the mango tree, as usual, flipping through her notebook. She sat down beside her and cleared her throat. "Omiladun, can I ask you something?" Omiladun glanced up and smiled. "Of course, what's up?" Anita hesitated, then blurted out, "You know the dance is coming up, right? I was wondering, do you think you could help me get a designer dress for the party?" Omiladun's smile faltered slightly. a designer dress? Yes, Anita said eagerly. You're always saving money for stuff like that. Maybe you could help me out just this once. I mean, I've always had your back. Urmila Doon frowned, her voice careful. Anita, I'd love to help, but I've been saving for months just to get my own dress. I really want to look good for Daniel that night. You know how important this is to me. Anita's face fell. So you can't help me at all? Urmila Doon shook her head, her tone apologetic. I'm sorry, Anita. I wish I could, but I can only afford one dress. And I've been planning this for a long time. You understand, right? Anita forced a smile, but inside she was fuming. She had always been there for Urmila Doon, always loyal, always supportive, and this was how she repaid her? Couldn't she sacrifice just this once to make Anita feel special? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Anita avoided Urmila Doon, replaying their conversation over and over again in her mind. By the time school ended, her frustration had turned into anger. If Urmila Doon couldn't share with her, why should she stay loyal? That evening, Anita sent Shola a message. Let's talk. Anita stood in front of Shola under the large mango tree behind the school building, her heart pounding as she prepared to say the words she had kept hidden for years. A part of her hesitated, questioning if she was really about to betray Urmila Doon, her best friend since preschool. But the resentment that had been building ever since Urmila Doon refused to share her savings with her pushed Anita to speak. I know something about Urmila Doon, Anita began, her voice trembling slightly. Something no one else knows. You'll think I'm crazy, but it's true. Shola leaned closer, her eyes glinting with curiosity and eagerness. Go on, what is it? Anita took a deep breath, glancing around to ensure no one else was nearby. She's a mermaid. For a moment, Shola stared at Anita, stunned into silence. Then she let out a nervous laugh. A mermaid? Are you joking? I'm not, Anita insisted, her voice firm now. I'm serious, Shola. Urmila Doon isn't like the rest of us. She's from the water. Shola's initial disbelief wavered as she noticed the seriousness in Anita's tone. How do you know this? Anita hesitated, her mind flashing back to that day in middle school. We had a swimming activity. Everyone got into the pool except for Urmila Doon. At first I thought she was just scared of water, but one day I asked her directly why she never swam. She kept avoiding the question until I promised I wouldn't tell anyone. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. That's when she told me. She said she can't go into the water because it would reveal what she really is. She's a mermaid, Shola. That's why she's always so careful around water. It's also why she never stays out in the rain for too long. Shola's eyes widened as the pieces started to fall into place. She thought about all the times she had seen Urmila Doon avoiding water activities, always coming up with some excuse. Are you sure about this? Shola asked, her voice now tinged with fear and excitement. I'm positive, Anita replied, guilt flashing across her face for a brief moment. She trusted me with this secret, but she hesitated before continuing. She never treats me like her equal. She always wants the spotlight, and when I needed her to help me with the dress, she couldn't even do that for me. I'm tired of being in her shadow. Shola processed Anita's words, her mind racing. She felt a mix of emotions: fear, disbelief, and an odd thrill at having this kind of leverage over Urmila Doon. If this secret got out, it would shake the entire school. I can't believe this, Sherlock Holmes murmured, her fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of her uniform. But this could be exactly what we need. Anita frowned. What do you mean? Shola's lips curled into a sly smile. Think about it. If everyone knew what Urmila Doon really is, she wouldn't be the center of attention anymore. People would be scared of her. Even Daniel might stop talking to her. Anita's stomach churned, but she nodded. She had already come this far, and there was no turning back now. You're right, she said quietly, but you have to promise you won't tell anyone it came from me. If only Ladon finds out I betrayed her, she'll never forgive me. Don't worry, Shola said, her voice smooth and confident. "I know exactly how to handle this. Omiladun won't know what hit her." As Anita walked away, a wave of guilt washed over her, but she shoved it aside. Omiladun had chosen her path, and now Anita had chosen hers. Shola, on the other hand, felt a rush of excitement. She had been struggling to find a way to bring Omiladun down, and now she had the ultimate weapon. All she needed to do was figure out the perfect moment to use it. The dance was only days away, and she couldn't wait to see how this would all play out. For Shola, the game had just reached a whole new level. The school auditorium was dazzling that evening, adorned with colourful lights and sparkling decorations. The annual dance event was in full swing, and the students of Victory Secondary School were having the time of their lives. The highlight of the evening was the announcement of the overall winners of the dance competition, Omiladun and Daniel. The two stood on the stage, their smiles radiant as the crowd cheered. Omiladun's dress shimmered under the lights, and Daniel looked dashing beside her. Together they seemed like the perfect pair, basking in their victory. Just as they began their celebratory dance, the doors of the auditorium creaked open, drawing everyone's attention. Shola and her friends walked in slowly, their faces set with determination. Each of them held a bottle of water, their steps synchronized as they made their way toward the stage. Whispers filled the room as students noticed their entrance. "What's going on?" someone murmured. Shola's voice rang out, cutting through the music and chatter. "Stop the music!" she commanded. The DJ hesitated, but eventually turned off the speakers, leaving the room in an eerie silence. Omiladun froze, her heart pounding as she saw Shola approach. She instinctively held onto Daniel's arm, her instincts screaming that something bad was about to happen. Shola pointed directly at Omiladun, her voice loud and confident. "Everyone thinks she's perfect, don't they? The beautiful, kind Omiladun. But she's not who you think she is. She doesn't belong here with us." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Daniel stepped forward, his brows furrowed. "What are you talking about, Shola? Leave her alone." Omiladun's hands trembled as she whispered to Daniel, "We need to leave, now." But before they could make a move, Shola and her friends surrounded them. Shola lifted her bottle, glaring at Omiladun. "You can run, Omiladun, but you can't hide. It's time everyone knows the truth." Omiladun panicked, stepping back toward the edge of the stage. "Shola, don't do this," she pleaded. Ignoring her, Shola nodded to her friends. Together, they uncapped their bottles, the faint scent of seawater filling the air. Omiladun's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but it was too late. "Now!" Shola shouted. In one swift motion, they poured the seawater over Omiladun. The entire room watched in stunned silence, their faces filled with confusion and curiosity. At first, nothing happened, and Shola's confidence wavered. But then, before their very eyes, Omiladun's legs began to shimmer and merge. Her feet disappeared, replaced by a long, glittering tail covered in scales. Gasps turned into screams as her transformation completed, and Omiladun stood before them as a mermaid, her beauty now otherworldly but terrifying. The crowd erupted in chaos. Students backed away, some clutching their dance partners, while others pulled out their phones to record the shocking scene. Daniel stared at Omiladun, his mouth agape. "Omiladun, is this true?" he stammered. Tears streamed down Omiladun's face as she looked at him, her voice trembling. "I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want anyone to know." Shola smirked, satisfied with the chaos she had caused. "See? She doesn't belong here. She's been lying to all of us." But instead of joining the ridicule, the crowd began murmuring amongst themselves. Some looked at Shola and her friends with disgust. "Why would you do that?" one student shouted. "She's not hurting anyone," another added. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Omiladun. Mermaid or not, she's still Omila Doon. You had no right to do this, Shola. Amelia Dean glanced at Daniel, her tears still falling. She whispered, "Thank you." Realizing the crowd wasn't turning against Omiladin as she'd hoped, Shola's confidence faltered. The principal suddenly stormed into the auditorium, demanding to know what was going on. But Omiladin didn't wait to find out. With one last look at Daniel, she turned and dove out of the nearest window, her tail shimmering in the moonlight as she disappeared into the darkness. The room fell silent, and everyone turned to Shola, their expressions a mixture of anger and disappointment. For the first time, Shola felt the weight of her actions. She had exposed Omiladon, but instead of victory, all she felt was emptiness.